Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I used to think New Year's Eve was overrated. Too loud, too crowded, too much pressure to feel hopeful on command. But that year, standing on my apartment balcony with the city stretched out below me, I let myself believe things could reset. It was December 31st, just before sunset, and the air had that sharp, clean cold that makes lights look brighter and voices carry farther than they should. Downtown was already glowing windows lit, traffic thickening, distant fireworks being tested prematurely like nervous coughs before a speech. I had moved to the city 8 months earlier for a job that looked better on paper than it felt in real life. Remote work, flexible hours, decent pay. What it didn't come with was connection. Most days, my only conversations were with delivery drivers and the barista who knew my order but not my name. So when my downstairs neighbor, Evan, knocked on my door that afternoon and invited me to a New Year's party a few blocks away, I said yes without thinking too hard about it. He said it would be small. Friends of friends. A rooftop view of the river. Low key, he promised, which felt like the kind of lie I was willing to accept. By 9, we were walking through streets packed with people moving in the same direction, all of us pretending we weren't cold, pretending we weren't carrying expectations heavier than the coats on our backs. The building was an old converted factory brick exterior, freight elevator, the kind of place that smelled faintly of oil and incense at the same time. The apartment itself was warm and welcoming. Exposed beams, soft yellow lights strung along the ceiling. Music humming just loud enough to fill silence without demanding attention. Someone had set out trays of finger food and bottles of champagne sweating into paper towels. Jackets piled up in a corner like shed skins. I drifted easily that night, the way you do when no one really knows you yet. I talked to a couple who had just gotten engaged. A graphic designer who hated his clients. A woman named Lena who laughed with her whole body and said she loved New Year's because everyone's defenses are already down. At some point, Evan disappeared into the crowd, and I didn't look for him. I didn't need an anchor. I felt light, present. Like I was exactly where I was supposed to be when the year turned. Around 11:30, I noticed a group of people near the far end of the apartment, clustered closer together than everyone else. 3 men and 1 woman. They weren't loud or disruptive. That wasn't what caught my attention. It was how still they were. How little they moved compared to everyone else swaying gently with the music. One of the men kept checking his phone. Not in the distracted way everyone else did, but quickly, purposefully, like he was waiting for something to change. Another stood near the balcony door, his body angled just enough to block it without looking like he meant to. I remember thinking they might just be uncomfortable. New people often were. I told myself that and took a sip of champagne that tasted too sweet, too optimistic. As midnight crept closer, the room tightened. People migrated toward the windows in the balcony, chasing the view. Someone turned the music down and started the countdown early, laughing when they lost track and had to start again. I stood near the kitchen counter, shoulder to shoulder with strangers who suddenly felt like allies. Outside, fireworks bloomed over the river, early bursts of color reflecting off the glass. 10 minutes to go. That's when I realized I hadn't seen anyone leave in a while. No one stepping out for air. No quick goodbyes. The front door stayed closed, untouched, as if the party had sealed itself shut. I felt a flicker of something then. Not fear. Not yet. Just awareness. When the countdown finally began for real, voices rose together, messy and joyful. Arms linked, phones lifted. I joined in, because that's what you do when everyone around you is shouting hope into the air. 10, 9, 8. At 0, the room erupted. Cheers, kisses, champagne spraying onto the floor. For a few seconds, the world narrowed to noise and light and the undeniable relief of having made it to another year. Then the music didn't come back on. Instead, I heard the lock on the front door slide into place. The sound was soft, almost polite. If you weren't listening for it, you could have missed it entirely. The cheering faded unevenly, pockets of laughter dissolving into confusion. Someone near the balcony clapped a few extra times before stopping, her smile lingering a second too long. One of the men from the quiet group stepped forward. He was close enough now that I could see the faint scar along his jaw. The way his eyes never quite settled. He raised his hand, not in a wave, but in a signal. "Everyone stay where you are," he said. His voice was calm, flat, like he was reminding us about house rules. At first, no one moved because no one understood. Then the woman with him reached into her coat and pulled out a handgun, holding it low but unmistakable. The room shifted instantly, joy draining out of it like air from a punctured tire. I remember thinking how strange it was that no one screamed right away. The instructions came quickly after that. Get down. Phones on the floor, hands where they could be seen. People complied in uneven waves, some frozen in disbelief, others dropping immediately like their bodies understood before their minds did. I was on my knees when I felt the cold of the hardwood against my palms. Someone nearby was breathing too fast, making a thin caning sound that cut through the silence worse than a scream would have. They moved efficiently, splitting the room the way they must have rehearsed. One guarded the door, one watched the balcony. The others collected phones, wallets, jewelry, anything that could disappear into a bag without slowing them down. As I lay there, face turned toward the floor, my cheek pressed against a champagne spill that smelled faintly of sugar and yeast, I had the clearest thought I'd had all night. This is how people end up in stories. I don't know how long it lasted. Minutes stretch when you're measuring time by fear. At some point, sirens surfaced in the distance, faint at first, then undeniable. Someone must have triggered an alarm. Or maybe a neighbor noticed the fireworks had stopped too abruptly. The group reacted instantly. Sharp commands, rushed footsteps. The back door opened, letting in a rush of freezing air that carried the sound of the city celebrating, completely unaware. Before they left, the man with the scar looked back at us. Not with anger, not with regret, just with focus, like he was checking off the final item on a list. Then they were gone. When the police arrived, the year was barely 15 minutes old. We were wrapped in blankets, giving statements we could barely remember forming. Strangers held each other like survivors of the same shipwreck. Later, alone in my apartment as dawn crept in, I watched the city wake up to a new year full of resolutions and fresh starts. Mine was simpler. I promised myself I would never again mistake noise for safety or assume that celebration meant protection, because sometimes the moment you think you're starting over is the moment everything changes forever. On the last night of that year, I was more interested in other people's windows than my own reflection. If I'd known what I was going to see at midnight, I might have drawn my curtains, turned my phone off, and let the ball drop without me. I might have skipped the party altogether and fallen asleep to some forgettable movie. Instead, at 9:18 p.m., I was 3 glasses of cheap Prosecco in on Nina's 5th floor balcony, watching the apartments across the courtyard light up one by one like terrariums. Nina's place was in one of those old U-shaped brick buildings that look romantic on real estate listings and drafty in person. The courtyard in the middle was a concrete well that collected echoes and cigarette butts. In summer, it smelled like laundry detergent and someone's overwatered basil plant. In winter, like tonight, it just smelled like cold. Inside, the party felt almost aggressively warm. The living room was packed with people I half knew, co-workers of Nina's, neighbors, someone's cousin. Fairy lights drooped along the ceiling. Music thumped from a Bluetooth speaker, and the radiator hissed like it was trying to outdo both. There was a pile of shoes by the door and a growing drift of bottle caps on the kitchen counter. I'd been swallowed by all of it for the first hour, talking to a graphic designer about fonts like it mattered, letting some guy named Tariq mix me a drink that tasted mostly like sugar and regret, laughing too loudly at a story I couldn't recount now if you paid me. The usual New Year's camouflage. Around 9, though, the air had started to feel thick. I'd slipped out onto the balcony with the excuse of fresh air, even though the temperature hit me like a slap. The metal railing was freezing under my fingers. My breath rose in quick, white clouds. From out there, the building became a theater. Across the courtyard, rows of windows faced me, each one its own little illuminated scene. On the third floor, a couple sat on a couch, both in sweatpants, their faces lit blue by a TV I couldn't see. Above them, a family moved around a table. The jerky motion of kids on too much sugar. Someone 2 floors down had a full-blown party going, colored lights, silhouettes dancing, a glimpse of someone in a sequin dress spinning past. I've always done this, watched other people's lives through their windows. You can call it nosy or lonely, depending on your angle. It feels a bit like reading the first sentence of 100 different stories and never finding out how any of them end. Spying again? Nina slid the balcony door open with her hip and stepped out beside me, holding 2 mismatched mugs that steamed faintly. Urban anthropology, I said. Highly scientific. She handed me one of the mugs. It was mulled wine, or at least red wine that had met a cinnamon stick at some point. My fingers ached with gratitude around the ceramic. "You all right?" she asked, leaning her elbows on the rail. "You've got that faraway documentary narrator look." "I'm fine," I said. "Just taking it in." Which was mostly true. I was taking in the quiet comfort of being in a room full of people without needing to perform. The relief of not being with my family, pretending this was a year to move past, when half of it still felt like wet concrete, and I was taking in the tiny scenes across the way, because they were safer to think about than my own. One window in particular kept drawing my eye. It was almost directly across from us, same floor, a little to the left. The blinds were half open, slanted, so I could see just enough to be annoyed by what I couldn't. Inside, a single tall lamp cast a yellow cone over the corner of a room. A large plant fiddle, leaf fig, maybe, sat by the glass, its leaves backlit, almost black. I could see the edge of a couch, the corner of a console table, the glint of a picture frame. At first, the apartment looked empty. Then a figure crossed the slice of visible space, just the blurry transit of a torso, an arm, back and forth, pacing. "New neighbor?" I asked. Nina squinted. "Dunno. That unit's been on and off the market for months. I've seen a guy there a couple of times. Hat, big coat, kind of, hunched. Might be 2 people, though, or I just keep seeing him when he's tired." As we watched, the figure passed the lamp again, closer this time. For a moment, his face caught the light, a narrow jaw, dark hair, deep circles under his eyes. He moved past too quickly to register more than that. "See?" she said, hunched. "Maybe he's just allergic to parties," I said. "Then why move into this building?" She gestured back at her own living room, where music and laughter spilled faintly through the door. A cheer went up at something I'd already missed. I didn't have an answer to that. People end up in plenty of places they don't fit. It had been 8 months since I'd moved into my own 1-bedroom on the other side of town. And there were still days I walked into it feeling like I'd broken into someone else's life by mistake. Behind us, someone shouted our names. Nina squeezed my arm and headed back in, promising fries and a fresh playlist. I stayed on the balcony a minute longer, cupping my hands around the mug to leach out the last of its heat. Across the way, the man disappeared from view. A few seconds later, the lamp went off, plunging the room into darkness. The plant became just a suggestion against the glass. I shrugged, told myself he'd gone out, and went back inside. For the next 2 hours, the night folded into itself in the way these nights do. More people arrived. Someone switched the music from throwback pop to R&B. A game involving post-it notes and celebrities started and dissolved in a corner. At some point, someone turned the TV on with the sound low, just to have the official countdown in the background. The numbers in the corner of the screen ticked inexorably toward midnight. I talked. I drank. I laughed more than I expected to. I answered the requisite "how are you doing" questions with the shorthand version. Better. Getting there. You know, one day at a time. And let people nod solemnly like we all agreed those phrases meant something specific. Every so often I drifted back to the balcony, under the pretense of checking my phone or getting air. Each time I glanced at that same window across the courtyard, the lamp stayed off. The room was dark. Once, I thought I saw a movement, just the barest suggestion of something shifting against the grain of the shadows. But when I blinked, it was gone. At 11:54, everyone crowded into the living room. The TV volume went up. The broadcast cut between a glittering city square and some studio full of people whose excitement looked rehearsed. Nina handed out plastic flutes of whatever sparkling wine hadn't already been claimed. "Okay," she said, climbing onto a dining chair to be heard. "You are all obligated to have the best year of your lives. Minimum. No exceptions." "Very low bar," someone called. "Some of us are starting from the basement," I said, and got the gentle laughter I'd been aiming for. The TV graphic flashed, 0050. The camera panned over a sea of strangers in heavy coats, hats with the year and phone numbers, faces upturned to a giant glowing ball. "Balcony at 1 minute?" Nina asked me quietly as she stepped down. "You always want to see the fireworks." She wasn't wrong. Every year, no matter where I was or who I was with, I ended up outside in the last 60 seconds, watching the city light itself up. It made the whole thing feel bigger than whatever small room I happened to be in. "Yeah," I said. "Balcony at 1 minute." I didn't know, walking out there with everyone else, plastic flute in hand, that I wouldn't remember a single firework from that night. I'd remember a window instead. We poured out onto the balcony with everyone's phones already in their hands. It was 11:59 when Nina slid the door open, and the warm, boozy air of the apartment spilled into the cold. People jostled for space along the rail, plastic flutes sloshing, cheeks flushed, breath hanging in white threads. Someone dragged the Bluetooth speaker closer so the TV countdown could leak through from the living room, a faint, tinny voice shouting numbers we already knew by heart. From 5 stories up, the courtyard felt like the bottom of a tall, square throat. Other balconies and windows ringed us little clusters of faces peering out, some waving, some just watching. Somewhere in another unit, someone blasted the same countdown a half-second out of sync with ours, the echo overlapping. Directly across from us, that one window I'd been half watching all night was still dark. I told myself not to look for it. If you give your attention to something often enough, it starts to feel like an obligation. But my eyes went there anyway, cutting away from the sky before anything had even started. 10, the TV voice shouted from inside. Hands went up around me, the universal gesture of either surrender or celebration. 9. All around the courtyard, lights shifted. Curtains twitched. On the floor below us, a group of students in paper hats leaned out their windows, already cheering. On the 3rd floor opposite, the sweatpants couple pulled their drapes a little wider and sat up straighter. At 8, the dark window flicked on. It was the same lamp as before, tall, narrow, throwing a cone of yellow light across that slice of room I could see. The plant was a black cutout against it. The edge of the couch glowed faintly, and on the floor just inside the frame, there was someone lying on their side. For a second, it didn't register as anything unusual. People pass out on New Year's. People lie down on floors all the time, especially if they've been drinking. My brain slotted it into that category automatically. Oh, someone didn't make it to the couch. 7. The man I'd seen earlier stepped into view. Same narrow face, same tired eyes, sweatshirt sleeves pushed up to his forearms now. He moved quickly, a kind of clipped efficiency to his steps that didn't match the lurching rhythm of regular drunken caretaking. He knelt by the body on the floor and did something with his hands. I couldn't see clearly. The plant blocked part of the angle. The blinds were still half closed, their slats cutting everything into stripes. 6. Someone on our balcony bumped my shoulder, laughing, gesturing up to the sky. I nodded reflexively but didn't look away. The person on the floor, smaller, I realized now, curled slightly, didn't move. 5. The man's head snapped up, just for a second, like he'd heard something. His profile was sharp in the lamplight. I saw his mouth form a word I couldn't hear. Then he looked toward the window. Toward me. It was not the dramatic moment movies give you, where two people lock eyes across a distance and know that they know. It was quick a glance, more like someone checking their reflection than searching for a witness. But his gaze passed over my face, paused just long enough that I felt it, then flicked away again. With hindsight, I know exactly what I should have done right then. I should have gone inside, grabbed my phone, dialed 3 numbers, and said, "Hi, I'm at 312 Crescent, looking into the courtyard, and I think something's wrong in the unit directly opposite us." I didn't have to be sure. That's what sirens and uniforms are for. Instead, I hesitated. Nothing I was seeing, on its own, was unambiguous. A person on the floor could be sick, could be unconscious, could be sleepy or stoned or dramatic. The man's quick movements could have been panic in the right direction. He could have been checking their breathing. He could have been rolling them into the recovery position. The mind is very generous with harmless explanations when it doesn't want trouble. 3. He stood up. For a heartbeat, his shoulders filled the window, blocking most of the scene. His right arm lifted awkward angle, elbow up, hand near his face. It looked, absurdly, like he was brushing hair off his forehead. Then something caught the light between his fingers. A small metallic flash, there and gone. A key, I told myself later. It could have been a key. 2. He reached for the blinds. The last thing I saw before the slats tilted down was the stillness of the body on the floor. Not the relaxed sprawl of sleep. Something tighter, drawn in. 1. The blinds snapped shut. Happy New Year. The courtyard erupted cheers. Whoops. Someone already spraying cheap champagne over the rail like we were on a winning team bus. At the same instant, fireworks bloomed somewhere over the street, explosions of color reflecting off the brick. The sound arrived like a physical shub-sharp cracks, deep booms, the fizz of smaller rockets. Around me, people hugged. Someone kissed the back of my head by mistake and apologized into my hair. Plastic glasses knocked together. Liquid sloshed over cold fingers. Nina yelled, "I love you, idiots," and meant it. I stood very still, my flute tipped but untouched, watching the closed blinds across the courtyard. "You okay?" Mina's voice came from my left, a little breathless. "You look like the ball dropped on your foot." I swallowed. "Do you know if he lives alone?" I asked, nodding almost imperceptibly toward the window. She followed my gaze, squinting. "Which one?" "Oh, him. No idea." "Why?" I thought I saw. I trailed off. Saying it out loud would make it more real and at the same time more flimsy. What was I going to say? I thought I saw a guy being weirdly efficient at midnight. "Probably just someone passed out," she said. "It's that kind of night." She bumped my shoulder lightly. "Come inside before you turn into an ice sculpture, okay? You can spy later. We've got cake." She went in. The balcony door side shut behind her, muting the TV and the chatter into a dull, cozy thrum. I stayed another 30 seconds, maybe less, staring at that rectangle of now blank glass. No movement, no shadow, just the reflection of someone's fireworks blooming behind me. When I finally went back in, my phone was buried under a pile of jackets on the bed. By the time I dug it out, the moment had already started to calcify into something easier to dismiss. "You were drinking," I told myself. "You only saw a slice. If it was serious, someone closer would have called." The building has its own eyes. It is very easy in a warm room full of people you like to decide that whatever's happening elsewhere is probably fine. I slept on Nina's couch that night, shoes lined up neatly by the armrest, coat folded over the back like I might need to leave in a hurry. I didn't. What woke me was the siren, not the distant, almost comforting kind that threads through city nights like weather, but the urgent, right outside kind. It rose and fell, then cut sharply as the vehicle stopped. close enough that I could feel the base of its engine idle through the floor. My mouth was dry. Someone had draped a blanket over me. It smelled faintly of detergent and old smoke. I pushed it back and sat up too fast. My head swam. It was 7:12 a.m. The world outside the windows was a washed-out gray. Last night's glitter turned to early morning trash. I padded to the balcony on bare feet, careful not to wake the body sprawled on the living room rug. When I slid the door open, the air slapped me fully awake. 2 police cars were idling in the alley that led to the courtyard. An ambulance was parked at an angle by the opposite side entrance, back doors gaping. Yellow tape fluttered weakly near the building's rear entrance. 2 paramedics in dark jackets wheeled a stretcher out, not rushed, not slow. The shape on it was fully covered. They took the side path, not the courtyard, so I only saw the edge of the gurney before the alley swallowed it. Enough. My eyes went up, automatically, to the window from the night before. The blinds were half open now. Daylight flattened everything. From this angle, the plant looked smaller. I could see the outline of a couch blanket thrown over one arm, a framed print crooked on the wall. And, just visible beyond the lamp, the edge of a white-gloved hand moving through the room. Later, in the hallway outside Nina's apartment, a detective would ask if anyone had seen or heard anything unusual around midnight. There was a polite little cluster of us Nina in an oversized sweatshirt. The guy from 5B with pillow lines still on his cheek, a woman I recognized mostly from the smell of her perfume in the stairwell. I told him about the lamp, about the man, about the person on the floor. I was careful with my verbs. Looked like, might have been, couldn't see clearly. I watched him write down my hesitant details in a compact, practiced hand. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look accusatory. Just tired. "Do you remember the exact time?" he asked. "Right at midnight," I said. "We were doing the countdown." He nodded, as if that fit something he already knew. "And you didn't call it in then?" "No," I said. The word felt like it belonged to someone else. I wasn't sure what I was seeing. He made another note. "You'd be surprised how often we hear that," he said, not unkindly. The news later would frame it cleanly. Woman, 29, found dead in her apartment on New Year's Day. A man known to her taken into custody at the scene. They used phrases like domestic incident and suspected homicide, and they paired them with a photo scraped from some social media account. Smiling face in good light. Shoulders angled toward the camera, no hint of the 5th floorboards. With hindsight, it all folds into a neat narrative. There is a before him moving in, them arguing behind closed doors I never registered. There is a during my narrow little vantage point across the courtyard. The lamp, the flash of metal, the blinds. There is an after sirens, tape, a door closed forever. In my memory, though, it's less tidy. It's the strange overlap of 2 sounds at once. Fireworks thundering somewhere above the street, and a body hitting old hardwood on the other side of a pane of glass. It's my friends shouting Happy New Year, while in another room, someone's year had just ended. People like to say that what you do at midnight sets the tone for your whole year. It's meant to be encouraging. Kiss the right person, think the right thought, and you'll be fine. I spent midnight that year looking at the wrong window and doing nothing about what I saw there. It didn't make me a villain. It didn't make me a hero. It made me what most of us are in the moment before a headline. A bystander with half the information and all the excuses. Now, every New Year's, when people start counting down and someone suggests going outside to watch the fireworks, I still step onto whatever balcony or sidewalk is available. Habit is hard to kill. I tilt my head back with everyone else, watch the sky split into color. But eventually, inevitably, my eyes drop. I count windows instead. On the last night of that year, I almost let an email save me. The invite from HR had sat unopened in my inbox for a week. ring in the new year at the Riverside Company Gala, open bar, live band, all the wording you use when you're trying to make a tax write-off sound festive. I told myself I was too tired, too broke for a new dress, too old for networking over flat champagne. What I meant was that I didn't want to watch other people kiss at midnight. But at 7:12 p.m., my apartment was too quiet. My leftovers tasted like cardboard, and my phone was a long, blank scroll of no new messages. When Emma texted, "I'm downstairs. If you bail, I'm keying your door," I actually believed she might. So I went. The Riverside Hotel looked like everyone's grand downtown hotel that's been modernized just enough to justify raising the rates. Crystal chandeliers, new carpet that still smelled faintly of glue, a giant projection screen in the ballroom showing a looping city skyline, and, in the corner, a digital countdown clock, 04/40/2018, 4/4/2017. Inside, it was warm enough that my glasses fogged. The band was already going, a brass section leaning hard into a Motown cover while middle managers tried to remember how to dance. People from work looked almost unfamiliar out of fluorescent lighting, softer, brighter, a little blurry around the edges with their first two drinks. Emma tugged me straight to the bar, ordered us champagne like we were in a movie instead of at a corporate event, and toasted to surviving. I laughed and clinked and let myself be pulled into conversations about everything except the year we'd just been through. For a while, it worked. The room was all gold light and good intentions. Coats piled on a side table, someone's sequin jacket already half sliding to the floor. I could feel my shoulders dropping from around my ears. I didn't notice the 4 men at the back table until close to 10. They didn't fit, and not just because they weren't wearing name tags. Most of us were in some version of party office wear loosen ties, glittery tops. These 4 had the look of people who'd arrived already zipped up, dark suits, plain shirts, no logos, no loosened anything. They sat near the side entrance, the one marked "Serve It" in discreet brushed metal. 2 faced the room. 2 had their backs half turned, angled toward the door. None of them were drinking. One had a glass of water he didn't touch. Another kept checking his watch, not in the absent how late is it way, but with quick, purposeful glances. I caught Emma's sleeve. "Do you know them?" She followed my gaze. "Probably somebody from finances plus ones, or the board. Old white guys in suits are our main export." "They're not that old," I said. The one nearest the aisle couldn't have been more than mid-30s. Clean-shaven, dark hair clipped close. When he laughed at something, the man beside him said, "It didn't reach his eyes." I watched his gaze move over the room, doors, band, bar, exits, not lingering anywhere long. If someone had told me then that they weren't from our company at all, that nobody on any floor of that hotel would claim them, I might have paid closer attention. I might have done something useless and polite, like mention it to the event coordinator. Instead, I filed it under mildly weird and let Emma drag me onto the dance floor when the band hit something we both recognized. The night built the way these things always do. More people arrived, cheeks pink from the cold. The bar line lengthened. The dance floor shifted from polite swaying to something looser. Someone started a conga line that mercifully died near the copier paper raffle table. The countdown clock kept eating numbers in the background. 02, 011, 12, 012, 01244. By 11:30, the air in the ballroom had gone heavy. My hair stuck slightly to the back of my neck. The band leader's shiny suit, trumpet in hand, leaned into the mic. 30 minutes, people," he said. "If you don't have someone to kiss yet, you've got half an hour to make some questionable decisions." The room laughed. Someone behind me yelled, "Spread the love." Emma rolled her eyes and bumped my shoulder. "I'm kissing you at midnight," she said, purely to make Mitchell from accounting uncomfortable. "On behalf of Mitchell from accounting, I'm flattered," I said. I went to the bathroom a little before 11:50, more to breathe than anything else. The hallway outside the ballroom was cooler, the carpet muting the bass into a distant thump. A couple stood by the elevators, arguing in low, tight voices that cut off when I passed. On my way back, I saw one of the men from the back table by the service door. Up close, he looked even less like a +1. His suit was too plain, his shoes too practical. There was a thin white scar along his jaw that disappeared into his collar. He held his phone to his ear, expression blank. "Yeah," he said into the receiver as I walked by. "We're set. On my mark, right after the countdown, when the room's loud." He glanced up as he said it, eyes flicking over me. For a moment, his gaze sharpened like he might actually see me. Then he looked through me instead, already somewhere else. I kept walking. My brain supplied, automatically, kitchen staff, timing the dessert course, confetti drop, some choreographed surprise. The hotel was full of staff with earpieces and checklists. The idea that he might be talking about something else didn't quite land. Back in the ballroom, everything had turned up a notch. The band had handed things over to a DJ. The music had more bass and fewer lyrics now. On the big screen, the feed had switched to a live shot of the city center. The famous ball glowing over a sea of people we were all vaguely glad not to be crushed among. Someone handed me a paper cone of confetti. Emma looped her arm through mine and tucked her head against my shoulder. "You made it to midnight," she said. "See? Not so bad." On the other side of the room, the 4 men from the back table had stood up. One moved toward the main doors, slipping easily into a gap between a potted plant and a cluster of sales reps. Another took up a casual lean near the bar. The third drifted toward the DJ booth, smiling at something the sound tech said. The one with the scar stayed roughly where he'd been all night, near the side entrance, hands in his pockets. On the screen, huge digital numbers appeared, 0030. The DJ killed the music, leaving only the murmur of the crowd and the electric hum of the speakers. Then, at full volume, "Riverside, are you ready?" We roared back like we were. "Here we go. 10. The room took it up as one. 9. The projection clock flashed. The beat of my heart tried to match it. 8. Emma's hand tightened on my arm. Around us, people bounced in place, phones held high, mouths already forming the next numbers. 7. Across the room, the man by the main doors reached up and unbuttoned his jacket. "SIX. The one by the bar shifted his weight, angling himself just slightly so his body blocked the bartender's view of the room. 5. The scar-jawed man at the side entrance slid his hand inside his coat, like 100 other men about to pull out their phones and film the moment. 4. He didn't pull out a phone. The part I always come back to isn't the gunshot. It's the half-second right before it, standing there with paper confetti in my hand, thinking the most important question in the room was who was going to kiss whom at midnight. F.O. Ward. The crowd's chant hit the walls and bounced back. The DJ had his hands in the air, milking it. On the big screen, the ball over the city plaza was starting its final drop. Emma's fingers dug into my arm. Tree. The scar-jawed man at the side entrance pulled a gun out of his jacket. It was small and black and so completely out of place in that room full of glitter and branded lanyards that, for a ridiculous moment, my brain refused to name it. My first thought was prop. My second was this is a joke and horrible taste. By the time I'd formed a third, he'd already raised it toward the ceiling. He fired once. The sound tore the countdown clean in half. There's no way to describe a gunshot indoors to someone who's only heard it in movies. It's not just loud. It feels like the air itself slaps you. The chandelier above the dance floor jumped. A few crystals shattered, tinkling down in time with the collective, confused scream that rose up. For a moment, nobody moved. Confetti cones froze mid-toss. Mouths hung open around words we hadn't finished saying. Then the other 3 men opened their jackets. Guns. All of them. The one by the bar swung his toward the bartenders. The one by the main doors leveled his at chest height, sweeping it across the closest cluster of people. The fourth, by the DJ, kept his pointed down but visible, his free hand out in a calming, lethal gesture. "Don," Scar Jaw called, voice carrying easily without a mic. "Everybody on the floor. Face down, hands out, now." You'd think a room full of adults would take longer to obey a stranger barking orders. We didn't. The second shot into the ceiling near the back of the room knocked whatever hesitation was left out of the air. Chairs tipped. Glasses spilled. Someone's elbow caught my ribs as we all folded at once, the whole crowd suddenly boneless. My knees hit carpet hard enough that my vision flashed. I went forward on my hands, instinctively trying to save my face. Someone's heel slammed into my wrist and drove me flat. The carpet smelled like spilled beer and industrial cleaner. When I turned my head, confetti slid against my cheek, paper sticking to skin that had gone clammy in an instant. All around me, bodies rearranged themselves into the smallest possible shapes, arms over heads. Hands laced behind necks, fingers spread where the gunman could see them. Face down, Scar Jaw repeated, closer now. Cheek to the floor. Look at the carpet, not at me. You look up, you're first. I believed him more completely than I'd believed anything in months. Emma's hand found mine, our fingers locking together in a desperate, sweaty grip between our bodies. I could feel her shaking through the shared contact. On my other side, someone was whispering, "Oh my God," over and over, the words breaking apart into breath. The music didn't cut out all at once. A few seconds of bass and synth bled on, ghost notes trying to pretend the party was still happening, until the guy by the DJ leaned over the table and slammed a hand down on something. Silence dropped like a curtain. "All right," another voice said. Calmer, almost conversational. It came from somewhere near the bar. "We didn't come here to shoot you. We came here for your stuff. Make this easy, you go home." A beat of shocked, disbelieving quiet. "Then, wallets and phones," Scarjaw said. "One hand at a time. Put them on the floor in front of your face. Don't tuck anything under you, don't get cute. My guys are walking through. You keep your eyes on the carpet and do what they tell you. You live. You understand?" Nobody answered out loud. The answer was in the sound, the soft, frantic rustle of people reaching into pockets and bags. Zippers catching, plastic and leather thumping onto the floor. My own phone was in the small bag clipped across my chest. My fingers fumbled the clasp twice before I got it open. "Left," Emma whispered, barely moving her lips. We slid our phones and wallets out together, pushing them forward until they left our reach. Shoes moved through the sea of bodies' heavy treads, quicker steps, the occasional stumble. A bag dragged against the carpet, filling with clinks and dull thuds. Every so often a voice, "Watch it. You, again. Anything else on you?" When someone hesitated too long, there was a crack, not a shot, but the sick, flat sound of a hand meeting a skull. Somewhere to my right, a man tried to get up. I didn't see it. I heard the grunt of effort, the scrape of a knee against the floor, the sharp, stupid sentence, "I'm not." The shot that cut him off was muffled and close, like a door slamming in the next room. The woman beside him screamed one long, high note that broke halfway through. The room flinched as one organism, then went horribly still. "That's it, Scar," Jaw said, voice suddenly cold. "That's your example. Nobody else moves. We clear?" If there was any answer, it was swallowed by the hum in my ears. My heartbeat had relocated somewhere behind my eyes, pounding so hard the carpet pattern in front of me seemed to pulse. A pair of feet stopped inches from my face. The shoes were cheap dress Oxfords, scuffed at the toes. I watched them turn slightly as the man above me scanned the room. "Got yours?" he asked. And for a wild second I thought he meant my things. Another voice further off. "Yeah, this side's clean." The shoes shifted. A hand, not mine, not Emma's, landed briefly on the back of my head. Fingers spread. The weight was firm but not violent, like someone steadying a package. "Stay down," he said quietly, "just for me." His breath smelled faintly of coffee. "You're doing fine. Then the hand was gone, the shoes moving on. Time went loose after that. Later, watching the security footage in my head, I can compress it into something like 4 minutes. The slow progress of the men through the room, the building of their bags, the small hurts inflicted on anyone who moved too fast or too slow. Living it, it felt much longer. Long enough to catalog the individual fibers in the carpet. Long enough to notice the way the air con turned on and off above us. Oblivious. Long enough to think in a weird, clear loop. I am face down in a ballroom with a gunman somewhere behind me, and this is how my year is starting. Last pass, someone called. The footsteps converged toward the side entrance. "All right, Scar," Jaw said, louder now, addressing all of us again. "We're leaving. You're gonna stay right where you are for 5 minutes. You get up before that, you might meet one of my friends we left outside." "You call the cops after 5? That's your business. We're done with you." 5 minutes. It sounded at once insultingly small and impossibly large. The service door hissed open. A blade of colder air cut across the back of my neck, raising goosebumps. Then the door clicked shut, and the only sounds left were ragged breathing and the distant whoop of the televised crowd still cheering from the big screen. Nobody moved. Not for 5 minutes. Probably not even for 3. Eventually, a head lifted somewhere near the front, then another. A choked laugh broke the tension, half hysteria, half disbelief. "Is everyone?" a voice started and broke. Someone else took it up. "Is anyone hurt?" The man who tried to stand was. He lay on his side near the edge of the dance floor, blood flowering slowly across his white shirt. People edged toward him carefully, like the bullets might still be hanging in the air. Phones started to ring, then realized they were gone. The scramble to find a line out felt almost as panicked as the scramble to get down had been. One of the bartenders produced an ancient landline from under the bar and dialed with shaking fingers. By the time the first siren wailed outside, the music still hadn't come back on. The news called it the Riverside New Year's heist, like it was a movie. Grainy exterior footage of 4 men in dark clothes, faces blurred by low resolution and pulled down caps. Police spokespeople standing in front of the hotel during daylight, assuring everyone that we're following multiple leads. In the days after, friends asked me what it was like, and I heard myself say things like surreal and over so fast, because those are the kinds of words people know how to nod at. I didn't have the vocabulary for the specific wrongness of confetti stuck to my cheek while a stranger's hand pressed my head to the floor. HR sent an email the next week about trauma resources and moving forward together. The subject line was, unbelievably, starting the year with gratitude. I deleted it without opening it. Now when December rolls around and someone asks what I'm doing for New Year's, I tell them I haven't decided yet. Which is technically true. I usually end up somewhere small, someone's living room, my own couch with the TV volume low and my phone within easy reach. When the countdown starts, people around me still lift their glasses and their voices. Some years I join in. Some years I just listen. Either way, at 10, my shoulders tense. At 9, I know exactly where the nearest exit is. At 8, I can feel as clearly as if it were happening again. The texture of hotel carpet against my face and the way the music didn't come back after the first shot. The ball drops. The room shouts. Somewhere, fireworks crack outside. And under all of it, in a quiet place at the center of my chest, I remember that one year I started the next 12 months on the floor of a ballroom, waiting to find out if I'd get to live through them at all. On the last night of that year, I decided to leave the party early and call it growth. If I'd known what was waiting between the 32nd floor and the lobby, I would have stayed on that rooftop until security physically removed me or the sun came up, whichever came first. I wouldn't have put my coat on at 11:47 p.m. or pressed the silver down button that would trap 8 of us in a metal box while the city counted down without us. But at 9:03 p.m., all of that was still hypothetical. At 9:03, I was just grateful to be somewhere that felt like a start, instead of an autopsy of the year behind me. Lena's building was the kind of glass high-rise that looks like it was designed by someone who only feels emotions about square footage and amenities. The lobby had a chandelier that looked like frozen rain, and a front desk staffed by a man in a blazer who did not look up when we walked past, just slid the sign-in sheet toward us with one hand while scrolling his phone with the other. "See?" Lena said as we stepped into the elevator for the first time that night. "Don't you feel fancier already?" She'd moved in 2 months earlier, upgraded from our old third-floor walk-up to a studio with an in-unit washer-dryer and a sliver of river view. She talked about the building like it was a new boyfriend she was trying very hard to believe wasn't out of her league. Up on the roof, it was easy to pretend it wasn't. They'd done it up for New Year's. String lights zigzagging overhead, tall propane heaters ticking faintly as they pushed warm air into the December cold. A rented bar set up along one wall. Somewhere, a Bluetooth speaker was doing its best to be a sound system, playing a playlist that lurched from throwback hip-hop to melancholy pop without warning. The city spread out on all sides, a grid of light under a low lid of cloud. Breath steamed in front of everyone's faces in quick white bursts. People wore the kind of outfits you only wear when you know you won't be outside for long, thin dresses under big coats, shirts with too few buttons, shoes that hated concrete. "Happy almost," Lena said, pressing a plastic flute of Prosecco into my hand. Her cheeks were already pink from the wind and the 2 drinks she'd had while waiting for me to show up. "I'm proud of you for not bailing." "I thought about it," I said, repeatedly. "I know." She clinked her glass against mine. "To ignoring your worst impulses." We drank. The bubbles scratched pleasantly at the back of my throat. The air was just the right temperature balance of cold face, warm hands. I felt not happy, exactly, but adjacent to it, like happiness was a room on the same floor I might eventually walk into. There were maybe 40 people on the roof, give or take. Most were building residents. I could tell by the way they moved through the space, comfortable and proprietary, fussing with the grill or the heater settings like they did this every weekend. A smaller cluster were guests like me, trying to act like they belonged by leaning on railings and pretending not to be impressed by the view. Around 9:30, a group of 4 came up in the elevator together. 3 men and 1 woman. I noticed them without really knowing why, at first the way you notice a change in temperature before checking the thermostat. They were dressed too warmly for the rooftop, for one thing. Heavy coats zipped to the throat, gloves still on. While everyone else shrugged out of layers and draped them over chairs, they kept theirs buttoned. One of the men, tall, with a buzz cut and a thin black beard, wore a baseball cap low over his eyes. Another had a dark knit beanie pulled down so far it nearly covered his eyebrows. They didn't gravitate toward the bar or the small pockets of conversation. They fanned out instead. One near the stairs, one by the elevator, one close to the glass parapet that looked down onto the street. The woman, dark hair and a low ponytail. Plain black parka stayed a step or 2 behind whichever man was nearest. Eyes scanning the crowd with quick, clinical sweeps. "New neighbors?" I asked Lena, nodding slightly in their direction. She followed my gaze, squinting. "Don't think so." "I'd remember that one," she said, meaning the tall guy in the cap. "Maybe 32nd floor people. They get their own elevator bank. The rich." "Do the rich not know how to take coats off, or?" "Maybe they're just cold," she said. But there was a wrinkle between her eyebrows she got when something bothered her. "Whatever. They're not our problem." She was right. At 9:37 p.m. They weren't. They stood near the edges of my awareness, unusual but unthreatening, like leftover furniture from a different party. I let it go. We talked instead about nothing and everything. Her new job that came with this building, my old job that I was trying to decide if I hated, how neither of us wanted to think too hard about resolutions. Someone produced a glittering 2027 headband and jammed it onto my hair at a crooked angle. Someone else started an argument about whether the rooftop grill could be legally used in winter. The countdown clock lived on someone's phone, propped on the edge of a planter where people could check in between conversations. 02-1-1 bio. 0, 1, Dio, Dio, Dio 1. The roof filled in more. The heaters fought a losing battle against the steadily dropping temperature. The warmth that replaced it didn't come from propane, though. It came from bodies, from shoulders bumping, from sound. Laughter, shouts, the distant echo of fireworks popping somewhere across the river, all wrapped the rooftop in a layer of noise that felt almost like insulation. I could feel myself loosening, the taut knot at the base of my skull unfurling piece by piece. Maybe this year wouldn't be better, I thought. But maybe it wouldn't be worse. Maybe the same was enough. Around 11:30, I went downstairs to use Lena's bathroom. I told myself I could hold it until after midnight, but my bladder and the second glass of Prosecco disagreed. The elevator felt oddly quiet after the roof. The music dulled to a low thump through the concrete. The air smelled like whatever cleaning solution the building used, a faint lemony chemical. On the 32nd floor hallway, the party sounds faded completely. The carpet was thick enough that my boots sank slightly with each step. Lena's door was one of 20 identical doors, numbers glowing soft blue beside each handle. Inside her studio, it was like stepping into a different world, cozy almost in that curated Instagram way. Throw blanket, plants, one candle burning on the coffee table for ambiance. The TV was on mute, looping footage of the Times Square ball over a sea of strangers. In the bathroom under the harsh bright light, my face looked more tired than I felt. I splashed cool water on my cheeks, did my smudged eyeliner with the pencil I kept in my bag for emergencies, and told my reflection, "You're okay." On my way back to the elevator, I heard footsteps behind me. I glanced back. The woman from the rooftop, the one with the low ponytail and the black parka, was walking down the hall in my direction. Without the crowd around her, she looked both smaller and sharper. Our eyes met for a second. Hers were pale, almost gray. "Hey," I said, because I was raised to be polite in corridors. She didn't answer. She didn't smile. She just dipped her chin in something that could almost have been a nod and kept moving. As we passed each other, I caught a brief whiff of cigarette smoke clinging to her coat, overlaying something floral. She stopped at a door 3 down from Lena's, slid a keycard from her pocket, and swiped it. The light blinked green. She went inside without looking back. I remember thinking vaguely, so they do live here, or at least in this tower. That made them less interesting, not more. My brain checked them off some internal list and went back to more pressing concerns, like whether my toes were going to survive another half hour on that roof. I hit the elevator button. The digital panel above it blinked. 27, 28, 29. The car was almost empty when it opened. Just one person stood in the far corner. The tall man in the cap, hands in his pockets, staring at his own reflection in the brushed metal doors. We nodded at each other in that reluctant, urban way of people acknowledging coexistence, but not inviting interaction. I stepped in, pressed the "Rof" button, and felt the slight drop in my stomach as we started up. He watched the floor numbers tick by. Not my face, not my body. The numbers. "You coming back up?" I asked, mostly to fill the silence. He shrugged, the gesture making his coat rustle faintly. "Maybe," he said. His voice was lower than I expected. "Might head out." The doors opened on the roof level. Cold air rushed in, carrying laughter and the faint metallic whiff of nearby fireworks. I stepped out. Behind me, I heard the soft ding of the doors closing again. I didn't see which button he pressed next. Back on the roof, everything felt turned up a notch. The city lights seemed brighter, as if the buildings themselves were anticipating midnight. The little phone on the planter read 00-1209. 12 minutes, someone shouted. A cheer went up. Half enthusiasm, half nervous energy. Lena reappeared at my elbow as if summoned. "Bathroom successful?" she asked. "Full triumph," I said. "Your soap smells expensive, by the way." She grinned. "My building has standards." We slipped back into our small orbit of people. Someone cracked a joke about resolutions. Someone else declared that their only goal for the coming year was hydration. The kind of small, silly promises people make when the big promises feel too dangerous. At 11:45, the woman in the black parka came back up. She emerged from the elevator with two of the other men behind her. The third cap guy wasn't with them. They didn't spread out this time. They stuck closer together near the stairwell door. One of them checked his watch. The woman scanned the roof again, but slower now, like she'd already done the work and was just confirming the details. If you'd asked me then why that bothered me, I wouldn't have had a useful answer. A lot of people check their watches near midnight. A lot of people stand near doors. I told myself to stop being paranoid. Paranoia had gotten me through a bad year, but it had also kept me home more nights than not. Tonight was supposed to be about not flinching at every shadow. The phone in the planter flipped under 10 minutes. 00959. The rooftop seemed to tilt subtly toward that glowing countdown. Conversation started to merge into one wide stream. People drifted toward the center without anyone telling them to. Lena grabbed my hand without comment. We had been standing together at midnight since we were 12, and the party was her parents' living room and a bowl of popcorn. "Okay," she said, exhaling. "We can do another year, right?" "Define can," I said. She laughed. "Fair." At 3 minutes to midnight, the building's fire alarm let out a single aborted chirp. Just one, not the full wail. Not the bright white strobes. A test pulse, like a heart skipping a beat. Several people looked up at the mounted speaker nearest them. One of the kids from the 29th floor, who was always in the gym, called. "False alarm, my cousin vaped in the stairwell earlier. It does that sometimes." Everyone accepted this more easily than they probably should have. The 4 strangers, 3 men, 1 woman shifted positions again. One near the bar. One by the elevator, one by the stairs. The woman aligned herself between the bulk of the crowd and the roof access door like she was about to make an announcement. I didn't put it together. Not then. Not until later, replaying every step, every look. At 11:58, I decided to leave before the kiss or no kiss moment. It felt like a small, rebellious kindness to myself. "I'm gonna beat the elevator rush," I said to Lena, raising my voice over the growing noise. "Text me when you're hungover." She frowned. "No, stay. It's 2 minutes." "I'll see the fireworks from the window," I said. I don't want to do the countdown this year." She searched my face, saw something there that made her let go. "Okay," she said. "I get it. Love you." "Love you," I said back. I threaded my way around the clumps of people gravitating toward the phone planter. The air seemed to crackle, full of that particular tension that only exists in the last seconds of a shared moment. I hit the elevator call button. The little arrow glowed softly. Behind me, the crowd began the ritual murmur as the phone flipped under 60 seconds. "Here we go," somebody whooped. "One minute!" The doors opened on an almost full car. I hesitated. A hand cut the door. "You can squeeze," a voice said. It was the woman in the black parka. Up close, I could see that her eyes weren't just pale. They were almost colorless, like old glass. She stepped back just enough to create a sliver of space. I slid in. The doors thudded shut. There were 8 of us in that small, bright box. Me, the woman, 2 men I'd seen with her, a middle-aged couple from the 29th floor still holding hands, and a young guy in a gold paper crown who smelled like expensive cologne and cheaper liquor. Someone pressed 32. Someone else hit LOBY. The elevator chimed its acknowledgement. Through the doors, muted now, we could hear the roar of the rooftop crowd starting the final countdown. 10, 9, 8. The car gave a tiny lurch as it started down. The woman slid her hand casually into her coat pocket. I had no idea that by the time the people above us shouted Happy New Year, we'd be on our knees in that same elevator. The panel pried open, the emergency phone dangling uselessly, while she explained in a voice as calm as the one I'm using now. Exactly what was going to happen if any of us tried to stop her. She didn't pull out a phone. Her hand came out of her pocket with something small and matte black curled into it. She didn't raise it high, didn't wave it. She just let it sit there, low and unmistakable. A gun looks different when it's meant for you. It shrinks the air. Everybody stay very, very calm, she said. Her voice was the same as it had been in the hallway flat, almost bored. The kind of voice you use to read instructions. Behind us, the muffled chant from the rooftop swelled. 7, 6. The young guy in the gold paper crown laughed once. A sharp, wrong sound. Is this? Are you serious? The taller of the two men with her stepped in beside him and pressed the elevator stop button with 2 fingers. The car jolted, then went still between floors. The printed numbers above the doors froze on 30. The rooftop chat kept going, warped by the doors. 5, 4. Hands where I can see them, she said. Against the walls. Nobody reaches for the buttons. Nobody reaches for your pockets. I promise you, this is going to be a lot less memorable if you just do exactly what I say. The middle-aged couple moved first, almost in sync, palms flattening against the brushed metal. I followed them, turning slowly, my fingers splaying against the cold surface. My heart felt like it had relocated to my throat. 3. She nodded to the taller man. Panel. He crouched by the control panel, slipped something thin and metallic under the seam, and popped the whole front off with a practiced twist. A nest of colored wires and circuit boards stared back. The little red emergency call button became just another bit of dead plastic. The emergency phone, a beige relic mounted below the panel, looked suddenly hopeful. The guy in the paper crown glanced at it. So did she. Don't, she said. He swallowed. Didn't. 1! The roof exploded in noise. It came through the ceiling like weather cheers, whoops. The faint crackle of fireworks. Someone up there screamed, Happy New Year, with the unself-conscious joy of a person whose biggest problem was who they were kissing. For a moment, the elevator was a quiet, bright pocket in the middle of it all. Happy New Year, she said mildly. On your knees. The floor wasn't as clean as the lobby made you think this building was. Up close, the industrial carpet showed its real-life flecks of dirt, a faint sticky patch under my palm, a single piece of glitter stuck stubbornly in the fibers. My knees protested as I knelt. The others followed, the couple, the paper crown guy, the other man with her, who stayed standing near the doors as a lookout. Up close, the gun looked smaller. The space around it made it big again. Here's the deal, she said. We are not here for you. We are here for what you can get us. We're going to be visiting some apartments. You're going to stay put. Her eyes moved over us, cataloging. Which of you lives on 32? She asked. The woman from the couple lifted one hand tentatively. We are 29. 30th, the guy in the crown said. His voice wobbled on the last syllable. I didn't ask you, she said, without heat. Her gaze landed on me. You? 32, I lied automatically, before my brain had a chance to file a protest. It was such a stupid thing to do that even now I can't quite explain it. Some outdated reflex about diverting attention, stepping between threat and other people. Or maybe I'd learned somewhere that confusion buys time, and time was the only currency we had. Her eyes stayed on mine for a beat too long. Then she turned to the taller man. Take him, she said, nodding at the paper crown guy. And her. He blinked. Me? Congratulations, she said. You're giving us the tour. The taller man hauled him up by the elbow. When he reached for my arm, his grip was impersonal, but not rough. I stood, legs shaky. Keys, fobs. "Whatever you use to open your doors," she said. "You hand them to him." She jerked her head at the tall man. "And you don't try anything clever. If you do, I push stop again, and we have a very different new year." The 29th floor husband fumbled with the ring clipped to his belt. The wife took her key card from her bag, fingers trembling. They both handed them forward like offerings. The tall man pocketed them with the ease of someone used to other people's valuables in his pockets. "You two stay with me," the woman said to the couple and the other stranger. "We'll be neighbors for the next 15 minutes. The elevator felt smaller every time someone moved. The air thickened with sweat and stale champagne and the faint ozone smell of tampered electronics. The taller man hit a sequence of buttons inside the exposed panel. The elevator lurched, then started moving up, not down. My stomach did its slow roll. "You're going to hurt them," the 29th floor wife said suddenly. Her voice was thin but steady. Upstairs. "We're going to hurt anyone who makes this harder than it needs to be," the woman said. "Keep your hands on the wall." The door slid open on 32. It was unnervingly quiet up there. Everyone with a social life was on the roof or at someone else's party by now. The hallway was a mirror of Lena's thick carpet. Discreet lighting, identical doors. "Move," the tall man murmured, hand tightening on my arm. They took us to 2 apartments in quick succession. 32-something, then 32-something else. The details blur even now. Keycards slid, lights blinked green. Inside, they moved with surgical precision straight to the obvious places. Console tables, nightstands, the little bowls everyone puts their keys and jewelry in because Instagram told them it looked intentional. We were backup scenery. He kept a firm clamp on the guy in the crown's wrist. I hovered where he put me. Near the door, heart hammering, useless. In the second apartment, paper crown guy edged a toe toward the hallway, like he was thinking of bolting. "Don't," I muttered, low enough that only he could hear. He didn't. Fear, for once, did its job. It took less than 5 minutes. Drawers yanked, bedside safes popped with practice tools. A laptop swept into a sack. The thieves moved like a team that had rehearsed this on a floor plan and now were just matching reality to the picture in their heads. Back in the elevator, the woman hadn't moved much. Knees bent slightly, feet planted, gun held in both hands now. The couple were still on the floor, hands braced against the metal, expressions gone slack with a kind of focused terror. "You good?" she asked the tall man when we squeezed back in. He nodded, breathing only a little harder. "Next floor," he said. "We've got 3 minutes before anybody realizes they can't get the car." "Skip," she decided. "We have enough." If there hadn't been a gun, it would have sounded like a discussion about restaurant choices. He hit the panel again. The car started down. This time, it didn't stop at any of the intervening floors. It glided past them, smooth and implacable. At 20, she spoke again. "Here's what's going to happen," she said. "We're getting off at the lobby." "You're not. You're going to count to 300, out loud if you need to. At 300, you can push whatever buttons you like and tell whoever picks up whatever you like. Security, cops, your mom. I don't care." The paper crown guy found his voice. You can't just." She tilted her head slightly. "Do you want to find out if I can?" He shut his mouth. The doors opened on the lobby. The marble floor gleamed. The front desk was empty. The blazer-clad concierge was, presumably, on the roof with everyone else watching the fireworks. The woman and the 2 men stepped out like they'd just ridden down from a friend's place. The tall one slung his bag fuller now more securely over his shoulder. None of them looked back. As the door started to slide shut, she caught my eye one last time. 300, she reminded me. "Don't cheat." Then the lobby disappeared, replaced by the brushed metal interior and our own pale faces reflected back at us. For a second, nobody moved. Then the 29th floor husband barked out 1. His wife picked it up 2. By 7, we all had it. Like kids in a classroom, like people trying to tether themselves to numbers because numbers, at least, made sense. At 53, the guy in the crown slid down the wall and put his head in his hands. At 1:07, my throat started to ache. At 2:30, we could hear distant sirens, hard to tell if they were coming toward us or going somewhere else entirely. It didn't change anything. We kept counting. At 300, the husband hit the red emergency button. That wasn't a button anymore. Realized it, then grabbed the limp emergency phone and pressed it to his ear anyway, as if sheer desperation might reconnect the severed line. It didn't. I hit OBY. Nothing. He tried 29. The car shuddered, thought about it, then complied. On 29, the doors opened to a hallway full of noise. Lena was there. So were half a dozen other residents. Hair windswept from the roof, coats half on, faces shifting from annoyed to alarmed when they saw us. "What the hell?" someone said. "We've been waiting for this car." "We got robbed," I heard myself say, before anyone else could craft a softer version. In the elevator, they're gone. There was a moment when the words just hung there, bumping against their expectations of how the night was supposed to go. Then everybody spoke at once. Security was called, then the police. Statements were taken right there in the hallway, under 2 bright lights, while neighbors hovered in doorways clutching their belongings a little closer. They used the New Year's noise, the officer taking my statement said later, almost approvingly. Smart. Everyone looking up, nobody looking at the elevators. As if admiration for the design made being part of it easier, the building sent an email the next day about enhanced security measures and our commitment to residents' safety. There was a line about how we're grateful no one was physically harmed, which I must have read 3 times before deleting out of reflex. No one was physically harmed. It's such a low bar and yet such a relief. Now, every time I step into an elevator on New Year's or any other crowded celebratory night, I feel my shoulders inch up. I look automatically for the stop button, for the emergency phone, for the small metal seam where someone clever could pry the panel loose. I notice who keeps their coat on, who scans the doors instead of the view. Up on some rooftop, people still shout 10, 9, 8, and throw their arms around each other when the numbers run out. Glasses still clink. Fireworks still smear color across low clouds, and somewhere below, in the quiet, narrow spaces between floors, other years are starting in ways nobody up there will ever know about. Mine started once on my knees in a too bright elevator with lemon-scented cleaner in my nose and paper-thin carpet under my palms, listening to a stranger with a gun tell me that if I counted high enough, I could have the rest of my life back. I did what she told me. Most years since, I still do. If I'd had more money, I would have flown. If my brother hadn't guilt-tripped me. Come home for New Year's, just this once. I would have stayed in my apartment with takeout and a movie I'd forget by morning. But at 8:45 p.m., I was standing on the cracked pavement of a downtown bus terminal, breath ghosting in the air, watching my ride pull in with its hazard lights blinking like a tired Christmas tree. The new Sky coach to Harrow Falls wasn't full, but it was full enough. Students in hoodies. A woman with 2 kids and 3 backpacks. A man in a suit who looked like he'd already worked through tomorrow. Most of us carried some variation of the same story. Can't afford the train, don't own a car. Still need to get somewhere that expects us. Inside, the heat hit me as I climbed the steps too strong, like they'd cranked it to compensate for the driver's door being open all day. My glasses fogged, then cleared. The air smelled faintly of coffee, cheap deodorant, and the stubborn ghost of fast food. "Happy almost New Year," the driver said, scanning my ticket with a handheld reader. He was in his 50s maybe, with a face that had settled into permanent mild annoyance, the way people's do when they've spent too long in customer service. "We should hit Harrow around 12:30 if the roads behave." "Happy almost," I said and moved down the aisle. I took a seat halfway back, on the right, by the window. The vinyl was cold through my jeans at first, then warmed quickly. Out beyond the glass, the city threw itself at the sky neon, street lights, the occasional premature firework cracking somewhere beyond my line of sight. Inside, people rustled into place. The quiet choreography of strangers deciding who got the empty seat beside them. A guy dropped into the row across from me a minute later. Late 30s maybe, dark parka zipped to the throat, baseball cap low over his eyes. He slid a duffel bag into the overhead compartment with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times and sat on the aisle, leaving the window empty. Everything about him was unremarkable from the neck down. What I noticed were his eyes. He didn't do the usual bus thing of pretending nobody existed beyond his phone. He looked, not long, not creepy stare long, but with sharp, quick sweeps that took in the whole bus driver. Emergency exits. Bathroom door. The teenage girl with earbuds already in. The man in the suit rubbing his temples. When his gaze passed over me, it snagged for half a beat. I tucked my scarf more securely around my neck, like that might make me less noticeable. Old habit. At 9:02 p.m., I watched him watching us and thought, vaguely, that he was just another restless traveler wound up by the holiday and the delay. I had no idea that in less than 3 hours I'd be lying in the aisle between our seats, cheek mashed into that same rubbery floor, listening to him decide whether we lived or died. We pulled out of the terminal with a familiar lurch. The city slid by in streaks of light and shadow. Someone a few rows up dialed a video call, holding their phone at the too high angle of people who haven't learned there's no flattering way to show a bus ceiling. "Say hi to Nana," a woman cooed. A toddler waved at the screen with sticky fingers. Behind me, 2 college kids compared playlists and half-whispered about whether they'd make it to the bar before the cover charge kicked in. Somewhere near the back, a man laughed too loudly at something on his own screen. It all layered into the soft, anonymous noise I've always found oddly comforting, other people's lives happening around mine. Close but not involving me. We hit the highway. The city thinned, then dropped away. Black fields replaced buildings. The bus settled into its steady humming rhythm. The overhead lights dimmed. The driver clicked the radio on low, and we are officially 3 hours away from 2026. A host's voice said, tinnily cheerful, "Wherever you're listening from tonight, we hope you're safe and warm." I pulled my coat tighter around my thighs. The heat on the bus had already tipped from pleasant to slightly oppressive. A bead of sweat slid down my spine despite the frost on the windows. Across the aisle, the man in the cap sat very still. No headphones, no book. His duffel flexed slightly in the compartment above him whenever we hit a bump, shifting its weight against the latch. "You going all the way to Harrow?" The question came from the seat in front of me. The teenage girl with the earbuds had twisted around, one bud dangling. Braces flashed when she smiled. "Yeah," I said. "You?" "Just to Milton. My mom's picking me up. She said if I tried to drive, she'd kill me." She rolled her eyes fondly. "You from there? Grew up in Harrow. Live in the city now." She nodded like that made sense. "I'm Lena," she said, then, almost as an afterthought, "Happy New Year, I guess." "Happy New Year," I said back. Normal, forgettable, human. That's how the first hour went. People dozed. The kid in the back snored. At some point, the woman with the toddlers carried one up the aisle in her arms, humming softly. The child's face smooshed into her shoulder. We stopped once at a service plaza, just long enough for half the bus to raid the bathrooms and the other half to smoke outside under a buzzing security light. The air out there was viciously cold, the kind that bit any skin you'd been foolish enough to expose. My breath puffed out in quick bursts while I waited for the bathroom line to inch forward. The man in the cap didn't get off. He stayed in his seat, eyes on his phone now, thumbs still. When I came back on, stamping snow melt from my boots, his gaze flicked up, then away. His duffel sat exactly where it had before, a dark, stubborn shape in the corner of my eye. We pulled back onto the highway. The radio host counted down to some early midnight in another time zone, somewhere where it was already next year. People on the bus clapped half-heartedly. Someone started singing and stopped when nobody joined in. Outside, the world narrowed to the twin cones of our headlights and the suggestion of trees beyond them. The inside of the bus felt even smaller in contrast. The air was thicker now, laced with the smell of coffee from the thermos the driver kept by his elbow. At 11:36, the driver's voice crackled over the intercom. "Folks, just a heads up. Looks like there's some black ice reported near mile 119, he said. His tone was casual, the way people talk about things they've rehearsed. "We'll be taking it slow through that stretch. Sit tight." A small ripple of unease went through the bus, then settled. Most of us had grown up with winter warnings. Black ice was like a character in a story we all knew how to tell. Dangerous, but familiar. What none of us heard was the quiet vibration from the man's phone across the aisle. The text that lit his screen. The 3 words on it, "Ready when you are." He read it, thumb hovering. Then, as the radio DJ chirped, 20 minutes to midnight on the East Coast, he slid the phone into his pocket and reached up, almost lazily, for the latch of the overhead compartment. The duffel bag thumped into his lap, heavier than it had any right to be. I didn't know when he unzipped it that the real danger on that stretch of highway wasn't black ice at all. The sound that snapped me out of my highway trance wasn't anything dramatic. Just a zipper. A small, careful zirp in the quiet half-dark, like someone fishing a snack out of a backpack. I glanced across the aisle automatically. The man in the cap had the duffel on his knees now. The overhead reading light above him was on. A hard cone of pale yellow that made everything in it look sharper than the rest of the bus. His hands moved inside the bag. Fingers sure, not fumbling the way people do when they're looking for chapstick or headphones. He lifted something out and rested it across his lap. It took my brain an extra second to accept what my eyes were already telling it. Black metal. Square slide. The particular way his fingers curled around the grip. Familiar from every movie I'd ever half-watched. Gun. My mind supplied, belatedly. That's a gun. For a heartbeat, nothing else changed. The bus hummed on. The driver coughed once up front. The teenage girl, Lena, bobbed her head slightly to whatever was playing in her earbuds. Then the man stood up. "Hey!" someone murmured from 2 rows back, more confusion than alarm. The man stepped into the aisle, legs braced for the sway of the bus, and turned to face us. The cap's shadow put his eyes in darkness, but his mouth was visible, set in a line that wasn't quite a frown, wasn't quite anything. "Everybody listen up," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Conversations died in mid-sentence. A kid sniffled. Somewhere. A phone screen dimmed. "I need you to stay calm and stay in your seats," he went on. He raised the gun just enough that we could all see it, angled toward the ceiling. "Driver, keep going like normal. Don't hit the brakes. Don't touch your radio. We're not doing anything stupid tonight if we don't have to. Okay?" His tone was almost gentle, like he was explaining turbulence on a plane. For a weird, hopeful second, part of me tried to reframe it. Medical emergency. Undercover cop. Anything but what it was. The driver's voice floated back, thin with forced casualness. "Hey man, whatever this is. Eyes on the road," the man said, not unkindly. "Hands at 10 and 2. You do that, we all see next year." I realized my own hands were gripping my seatbelt buckle so hard my knuckles ached. I hadn't even registered clicking it on when we left the terminal. Now the strap felt like the only thing pinning me in place. Beside me, Lena had pulled one earbud out. Her face had gone very still, the way teenagers do when they're trying to act like they're not scared yet. Her gaze flicked from the gun to my face and back, as if checking whether I'd confirm we were both seeing the same thing. I nodded, just once. "Yes. Real. Okay," the man said again, more to the room now. "Here's how this is going to go. In a few minutes, we're going to make a stop. When we do, I'm getting off this bus. Before that, you're going to slide your phones and wallets into the aisle. One by one, nice and easy." A soft, disbelieving ripple moved through the passengers. Not quite a protest, not quite acquiescence. The man lifted his free hand, palm out. "I don't want to hurt anybody," he said. "You test me on that, I will. You don't, I won't. Simple." Up front, the radio was still on. The host's voice burbled faintly under everything. 15 minutes till the ball drops in Times Square. It sounded like it was coming from very far away. "Start with the back," the man said, nodding toward the last row. "Right side, then left. Phones first, then wallets. No tossing. Slide them. If I see anything that looks like you're aiming, it ends badly." Nobody moved. Then, from the very back, the too loud laugh guy cleared his throat. Okay, he said, voice shaking despite the words. Just take it, man." Something small and rectangular scraped along the floor toward the front. That broke whatever had been holding the rest of us frozen. A phone thunked into the aisle from the row behind me, then another. On my side, Lena's hand shook as she dug in her hoodie pocket. My mom, she'll kill me if she whispered. "She'll kill you a lot less than he will," I murmured back, the words harsher than I meant them to be. "It's just stuff. Let it go." She swallowed hard, then slid her phone out, followed by a slim cord-tied wallet. They bumped against my boot, and then out into the yellow strip of light. My own phone suddenly felt like a live thing in my pocket. Half my life lived in that rectangle: photos, contacts, the voice messages from my dad. I hadn't been able to listen to since the funeral. I had the absurd impulse to pull the SIM card out with my teeth and swallow it. Instead, I did what everybody else was doing. I slid it forward. It joined the slow, sad tide of glass and leather, moving toward the front like offerings. By the time he reached our row, the aisle was cluttered with our lives in miniature. He crouched, keeping the gun trained vaguely in our direction without pointing it at any one of us, and swept the valuables into the duffel with his free hand. Up this close, I could see the lines at the corners of his mouth. Not laugh lines, not quite worry either. Just the marks of someone who'd clenched his jaw a lot in his life. When his hand brushed my phone, he glanced up briefly. His gaze met mine. In that half second, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not cruelty exactly, just a cold, flat resolve. "Head down," he said softly. Not a threat. An instruction. I dropped my eyes. We hit a patch of rough road then, the bus shuddering under us. Somewhere up ahead, a green sign flashed past announcing Mile 119 in reflective letters. Black ice, I thought, absurdly. As if we needed anything else. The radio crackled louder for a moment as we went under an overpass. 10 minutes to midnight on the East Coast. Wherever you are tonight, stay safe. I almost laughed at that. When the duffel was full enough to strain its seams, the man stood, swung it over his shoulder, and walked up the aisle. He moved like someone who'd rehearsed this in his head a dozen times and still couldn't believe he was really doing it. "Okay, driver," he said when he reached the front. "You're gonna pull into the next turnout. Slow, no heroics. You try to be clever, I put one in the engine block and we all find out how icy that road really is. Got me?" "Yeah," the driver said, so quietly I barely heard it. "Yeah, I got you." We drove on. The bus felt like it was holding its breath. No one spoke. A child whimpered once and was shushed immediately. I could feel every vibration in the floor through my boots, each tiny course correction as the driver steered us through whatever slick patch lay ahead. Outside, darkness. Inside, the narrow, bright cone of the overhead light where the man stood, one hand on the rail, duffel dragging slightly at his shoulder. I don't know exactly when midnight came. It wasn't the way I'd always pictured it. No visible countdown, no glittering ball on a screen, no glasses lifted. It arrived as a small chiming sound from someone's abandoned phone halfway up the aisle. an alarm tone pinging cheerfully into the tension. The man's mouth twitched just once. "Happy New Year," he said, almost to himself. We pulled into the turnout a minute later, a deserted slice of asphalt off the highway, lit by one lonely sodium street lamp. It painted the snow in sickly orange. "Keep your seats," the man said to us. "Count to 100 before anybody tries anything. Make your calls after that. You won't catch me." He backed down the steps, gun still in his hand, never quite turning his back on us. At the bottom, he paused, looked up the length of the bus one last time, then stepped into the dark. The door hissed shut behind him. For a beat, the only sound was the engine's low rumble. Then from the back, someone started to sob. Not the sharp, panicked kind from movies. The quieter, leaking kind people do when they realize they're still here. Nobody counted out loud. Nobody had to. We all sat there, like he'd threaded us to the seats, eyes on our knees, letting the seconds stack up until they felt like enough distance between us and whatever came next. At some point, the driver picked up his radio with shaking hands. "Dispatch, this is New Sky 482 on Route 7, he said. "We've been robbed. No shots fired. Everyone's here. We need state troopers. We need someone." Later, the troopers would tell us we were lucky. Lucky he hadn't fired. Lucky the driver had kept his head. Lucky the ice hadn't taken us when he made us keep going. It didn't feel like luck. Sitting in a fluorescent-lit roadside diner at 2 in the morning, filling out statements on forms that still smelled like toner, borrowing a phone to call my brother and say, "I'm okay, but I'm going to be late." It felt like the year had changed somewhere on that stretch of highway, and I'd missed it. I didn't see any fireworks that night. I didn't clink a single glass. When people asked later what I'd done for New Year's, I said, took a bus home and let them picture something else. The truth is, my year started in the dim aisle of a coach somewhere past mile 119, with a stranger's voice saying, "Head down," and a cheap alarm tone cheerfully chiming in a new calendar I wasn't certain I wanted. Now, whenever December rolls around and friends make elaborate plans, tickets, outfits, midnight reservations, I think about that text on his screen, "Ready when you are." I used to believe the year waited politely at the edge of midnight for us to be ready too. These days, I know better. Sometimes it just keeps coming. Whether you're strapped into your seat or not,